In this video, the goal is to make a chest intro animation in DaVinci Resolve 20 that feels like the start of a real close. Not just a few close shots stacked together, but a sequence with structure, mode, and a clear finish. Everything happens inside the Fusion page. And yes, the node graph looks messy at first, but the big idea is actually simple. The composition is built in sections. Each section creates one ingredient of the final animation. One part builds the textured paper world, another part builds the chessboard and pieces as clean layers, another handles the titles and simple graphic shapes, like the dashed root line and the target marker. And then there's the transition system, where the cloud swipe shifts the scene into the cinematic chess shot before everything lands back on the lesson title card. So instead of treating Fusion like one giant mess of nodes, we are going to treat it like a modular setup. We will look at the graph as a few readable islands, see what each island produces, and then follow how all of those outputs get merged into the final result at the bottom. By the end, the whole competition will feel less like spaghetti and more like a workflow you can reuse for future lessons. Quick heads up before we jump in. We are not building this chess intro animation from scratch in this video. If we did that properly, we would be here for hours and days. Instead, I am starting with the finished Fusion project and the full node graph already built. And what I will do is give you the big picture tour. I will break the graph down into clear clusters, like little islands, and explain what each section does and how they work together. Also, I'm not going to open every single node and go through settings one by one. That would turn this into a mega technical course. And that's not the point here. The point is to understand the structure and the logic. If you want the actual project file, I can send it. Just email me with the subject line chessintro.dra request, and I will send you the .dra project so you can open and study it. You will find my email address on my channel site. You have to be logged into YouTube. This whole Fusion composition is built like a modular system. It looks overwhelming at first because there are lots of nodes, but the logic is actually simple. Separate ingredients get built in their own clusters, and then they all get combined at the end into one clean final shot. Fusion is doing three main jobs at the same time. First, it builds a graphic boss world. That's where the paper texture background, the clean shapes, the dashed root line, the target icon, and the big titles come from. These elements are designed to feel like a lesson, simple and readable. Second, it builds the chess layers as real components. The board and the pieces aren't treated like one flat image. They are treated like layers that can be positioned, cleaned up, adjusted, and made to sit properly in the scene. That's why the chess elements feel placed, not pasted. Third, it handles the mood switch. That's where the cinematic chess shot comes in and the cloud swipe acts like a curtain. Instead of a basic fade, Fusion uses a visual transition that actually feels like part of the design. The composition briefly leaves the clean graphic world, shows the cinematic moment, and then returns to the lesson style for the title card. So the big picture is, this isn't one complicated effect. It's a set of smaller systems working together. Background system, chess system, text system, transition system, all feeding into one final result. Once you see it that way, the graph stops being scary. This top section is basically the remote control for the whole composition. Even though it's small, It decides how everything behaves. The idea is simple. Instead of treating 20 nodes one by one, this group acts like a single place where the important settings live. And that could be things like overall timing, intensity, opacity, color vibe, softness, or how strong a certain effect should be. It's also where you keep the composition organized because it gives you one clear entry point. In the bigger picture, this section is about consistency. If the paper texture, the chess elements, and the titles are all being pushed toward the same look, then the control section is the place that keeps them aligned. Without that, a project like this turns into random fixes everywhere. And that's when it becomes impossible to adjust later. His left cluster is one of the main build factories. It takes raw inputs and turns them into something usable and clean before that result gets sent into the final assembly. This is where a lot of the groundwork happens. It's not the final look yet. It's the preparation and shaping stage. This section handles one category of visuals. For example, it might be the paper world based or a specific chest layer or a graphic element set. We will often see repeated patterns here. Correct the image, isolate what you need, position it, soften edges, match color, and then output a clean layer. That's the logic. The role in the bigger picture, this is where the composition gains structure. The left side builds one major layer. Let's move into one chain and show the repeating steps. Take an asset, make it look right, make it sit in the scene, then send it forward. The center stack is the main construction zone. You can think of it as the spine of the composition. A lot of nodes are stacked vertically here because this is where multiple layers are being built in a controlled order. The center is often where timing, layering, and the main visual hierarchy gets decided. What's happening in this section is basically refinement. The center is where those parts start to feel like one coherent scene. You will often see transforms, merges, and adjustments in this area because it is where elements get aligned and blended into the same visual world. In the bigger picture, this is the section that prevents the project from looking like overlays on top of overlays. It's where the scene becomes designed. The difference between amateur and polished fusion work is usually here. Spacing, order, softness, shadows, and how the layers interact. The right cluster is another dedicated build area, separate from the left for a reason. These elements have their own rules. Maybe they are treated differently, maybe they animate differently, or maybe they belong to a different mode of the intro. Think of it like a second toolkit. In this project, that makes sense because the animation has different visual worlds. The graphic chess course look, the paper explainer look, and the cinematic insert. When you have distinct looks, it's smart to build them in separate areas. That way, you can change one world without breaking the others. What's happening in this white cluster is take a set of assets, process them, and output a clean layer. Same logic as the left cluster, but for a different purpose. The role in the bigger picture, this is where modularity happens. If you ever want to reuse the intro or swap out a lesson title or change the look of one section, the right cluster makes that possible. It's compartmentalized. This top right section is the quick prep station. It's small, but it has a very clear job. Take a few assets that need light treatment, get them into the right format, and send them forward. In the bigger picture, this section supports the rest. It's more like maintenance, but it matters because poorly prepared assets ruin the illusion. So the role here is consistency and cleanliness. When you are building a layered animation, the fastest way to lose quality is to treat each asset differently by accident. This prep corner prevents that. It makes sure your inputs are standardized before they join the bigger merge lines. The bottom strip is the finish line. This is where all the separate build sections finally meet. The reason it looks like a long horizontal chain is because it's acting like an assembly line. Layer comes in, gets merged, then the next layer comes in, gets merged, and so on until you reach the final output. What's happening here is mostly about order and final polish. This is where we decide what sits on top of what. Background first, then chest elements, then graphics, then transitions, then any mask grading or soft softening. Rolling the bigger picture, this is the truth of the node graph composition. If the merge order is wrong, the whole scene breaks. If the order is right, everything feels intentional.